The real Gene Kelly was nothing like his happy-go-lucky movie characters. Just ask his widow, who's finally breaking her silence after 30 years. Patricia Ward was only 26 when she met the Hollywood legend. What started as a job interview turned into something nobody saw coming. Now she's telling all about their secret 47-year age gap romance, the family drama it caused, and why Kelly's co-stars left movie sets covered in bruises. Gene Kelly was born on August 23, 1912, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His full name was Eugene Curran Kelly. He was the third of 5 children in a working-class Irish-American family. His father, James, worked as a traveling salesman, earning $75 a week. His mother, Harriet, took care of the home and made sure her children had every opportunity to learn music and dance. Money was always tight, but she believed these activities would give them a better future. From an early age, Gene was full of energy. He loved skating, swimming, and playing baseball. More than anything, he wanted to be a shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Dance was never part of his plan. When he was 8 years old, his mother enrolled him in dance classes, but he hated them. Back then, boys didn't dance. He was embarrassed and quit after a few lessons. But Harriet didn't give up. She worked as a receptionist at the dance school and kept encouraging Gene to try again. By the time he turned 14, he finally gave in. This time, something clicked. Instead of seeing dance as something separate from sports, he started to recognize the power and athleticism behind it. The same strength and precision needed in baseball also applied to dance. Once he saw that, he never looked back. In 1929, everything changed. The Great Depression hit, and Gene's family struggled to make ends meet. He had just started studying economics at Pennsylvania State University, but money was too tight. He dropped out and returned home to Pittsburgh. To help support his family, he worked whatever jobs he could find. He pumped gas, laid bricks, and served sodas at a local shop. But even with long hours, he didn't give up on dance. At night, he and his brother Fred performed at talent shows and nightclubs across Pennsylvania. These gigs brought in extra money and gave him more experience on stage. By 1932, Gene wasn't just performing. At 20 years old, he co-founded the Gene Kelly Studio of Dance in Pittsburgh. His energy and unique teaching style made the studio an instant success. Unlike most dance teachers, Gene focused on making dance exciting for boys. He compared it to sports, showing how balance, strength, and quick footwork were just as important in dance as they were in baseball or boxing. His approach worked. The studio attracted over 150 students each year. In 1933, his family opened a second location in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. For 6 years, Gene taught, choreographed, and performed in Pittsburgh. He was becoming well known in the local theater scene, but he wanted more. By 1938, he decided it was time to take a bigger risk. He packed his bags and moved to New York City. At first, he worked behind the scenes, choreographing small productions, but it didn't take long for people to notice his talent. His dance style was different from anything Broadway had seen before. He blended classic technique with powerful, athletic movements. He didn't just dance. He moved with the energy of a sportsman and the grace of a performer. In November 1938, Gene Kelly got his first big break on Broadway in Leave It to Me. This Cole Porter musical gave him a small but important role as the American ambassador's secretary. He shared the stage with Mary Martin while she performed My Heart Belongs to Daddy, a number that would become iconic. The role wasn't flashy, but it was enough to get him noticed. Robert Alton, a respected choreographer, had worked with Kelly before at the Pittsburgh Playhouse. Now he saw something special in him. Alton was impressed not just by Kelly's dancing, but also by his ability to teach. That skill would soon open new doors. Alton hired Kelly for One for the Money, where he performed in 8 different routines, showing off his acting, singing, and dancing skills. This was a major step forward. Just a year earlier, Kelly had been struggling to find steady work in New York. He had even returned to Pittsburgh in 1938 to choreograph Hold Your Hats, a review by Charles Gaynor. That experience shaped the way he approached dance. He wasn't just thinking about steps, he was thinking about how movement could tell a story. In Leave It to Me, that idea started to take form. He also learned something valuable from working with Mary Martin, how to support a star without fading into the background. That ability would become one of his greatest strengths. Kelly's breakthrough came in Pal Joey, which premiered on December 25, 1940, at the Ethel Barrymore Theater. This Roger Rodgers and Hart musical gave him his first lead role as Joey Evans, a nightclub performer with charm but questionable morals. The role was designed for a dancer rather than a singer, making Kelly a perfect fit. He brought energy and personality to the character, making him both entertaining and unpredictable. During rehearsals, Kelly's perfectionism became clear. Van Johnson, who performed alongside him, recalled seeing Kelly still practicing late at night after a full day of rehearsal. He would stand under a single lamp, going over his moves again and again. That dedication paid off. Pal Joey ran for 374 performances, making it the third longest-running Rodgers and Hart musical at the time. Critics had mixed feelings about the show's darker themes, but Kelly's performance was undeniable. He had proven that he could carry a production. Hollywood took notice, but Kelly wasn't ready to leave Broadway just yet. Before heading to Hollywood, he choreographed Best Foot Forward in 1941. This musical was fast-paced and energetic, and Kelly's choreography helped bring it to life. He had a gift for making complex routines feel natural, blending storytelling with movement in a way that felt effortless. His work on the show reinforced his reputation as one of Broadway's most innovative choreographers. Gene Kelly's journey into Hollywood wasn't easy. He had the talent, but talent wasn't always enough. When he first arrived in Los Angeles, he found himself stuck. He had signed a contract with David O. Selznick, but nothing was happening. Selznick didn't have the right projects for him, so Kelly waited. Weeks turned into months. Then came a turning point. Selznick decided to loan him to MGM for a film called For Me and My Gal in 1942. That decision changed everything. The film paired Kelly with Judy Garland in a World War I-era story about two vaudeville performers. MGM wasn't sure about casting a newcomer, but Garland saw something in Kelly that others didn't. She insisted he get the role. That kind of support was rare, and Kelly never forgot it. Working alongside Garland helped him adjust to Hollywood, but there were challenges. Director Busby Berkeley had a strict, old-fashioned approach to musicals, and Kelly didn't fit into that mold. He wanted to dance differently. He wanted movement to feel natural. Berkeley wanted precision, sharp lines, and rigid choreography. Tensions on set were high, but Kelly's charm and energy stood out. Audiences saw something fresh in him. The song For Me and My Gal became one of his most memorable performances. That first film proved he had star power, but CoverGirl in 1944 proved he had vision. This time, he was paired with Rita Hayworth in a film about love, ambition, and Broadway dreams. But the real magic happened in the alter ego sequence. In this scene, Kelly's character dances with a ghostly version of himself. It was a cinematic first, blending technical brilliance with deep emotion. To make it work, Kelly had to film the dance twice. Every camera movement had to match exactly in both takes. The second version of him, his alter ego, was then superimposed onto the screen. The effect was seamless. Kelly later called it the hardest thing he had ever done, but it paid off. That sequence became one of the most iconic moments in musical history. CoverGirl wasn't just a showcase for Kelly's dancing. It also changed his role behind the scenes. MGM had been hesitant to give him too much creative control, but after seeing what he could do, they started trusting him more. He had earned the freedom to experiment, and he wasn't going to waste it. Then, in 1945, Anchors Aweigh took his innovation even further. This film teamed Kelly with Frank Sinatra in a light-hearted story about two sailors on shore leave in Hollywood. But the scene that made history had nothing to do with Sinatra. It was Kelly's dance with Jerry Mouse, an animated character from Tom and Jerry. At the time, live action and animation didn't mix like this. The process was incredibly complex. First, Kelly had to perform the entire dance alone. His movements needed to be precise because animators would later match Jerry's steps to his. Using a technique called rotoscoping, they studied his performance frame by frame to create the illusion that the two were dancing together. Even shadows on the floor had to be drawn in by hand to make it look real. Originally, the scene was supposed to feature Mickey Mouse, but Walt Disney turned it down. That led MGM to create Jerry Mouse specifically for this moment. Audiences had never seen anything like it. The sequence felt effortless, but it was groundbreaking. Anchors Aweigh earned 5 Academy Award nominations, including one for Best Actor, Kelly's only Oscar nomination. The film also won for Best Scoring, cementing its place in musical history. Between 1942 and 1945, Kelly went from a Broadway dancer with no film experience to one of Hollywood's most innovative stars. He wasn't just performing, everything. He was changing how musicals were made. And this was only the beginning. Gene Kelly was at the peak of his career when he created some of the most legendary musicals in Hollywood history. His films were not just about dance. They were about telling stories in ways no one had ever seen before. His energy, creativity, and bold ideas changed musicals forever. In 1952, Singin' in the Rain became the defining film of his career. Co-directed by Kelly and Stanley Donen, it was set during Hollywood's shift from silent films to talkies, a time of chaos for many actors. Kelly played Don Lockwood, a silent film star struggling to adjust to the new era. The story followed his romance with Kathy Selden, played by Debbie Reynolds, while also capturing the challenges of filmmaking during that transition. One scene made history, the famous Singin' in the Rain sequence. Kelly danced with pure joy, twirling an umbrella as rain poured down around him. It looked effortless, but behind the scenes, it was a different story. Kelly had a fever of 103 degrees. The artificial rain kept causing technical problems because Culver City residents were watering their lawns at the same time, reducing the water pressure. The scene took a day and a half to film, but the final result became one of the most iconic moments in cinema. Kelly also changed how musicals were filmed. Instead of using static cameras and stage-like sets, he and Donen shot with dynamic angles and real locations, making the dance numbers feel alive. Singin' in the Rain premiered on April 11, 1952. It did not win any Academy Awards, but over time, it became one of the most celebrated films ever made. Critics and fans still rank it as the greatest musical of all time. Just a year before, in 1951, Kelly had already created another masterpiece, An American in Paris. Directed by Vincente Minnelli, the film followed Jerry Mulligan, an American painter living in post-war Paris. He falls in love with Lisa Bouvier, played by Leslie Caron, but she is engaged to another man. The movie was inspired by George Gershwin's 1928 orchestral composition, and its music gave the film a unique jazz-infused rhythm. The highlight was the final ballet sequence. It lasted nearly 17 minutes and was choreographed entirely by Kelly. Mixing classical ballet with modern dance, he turned it into one of the most ambitious performances ever put on film. An American in Paris won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, something rare for a musical at the time. Kelly himself received an honorary Academy Award for his groundbreaking choreography. Kelly wanted Hollywood to see musicals as serious art, not just light entertainment. He actively promoted An American in Paris during the Oscar season, making sure voters recognized its artistic value. His efforts paid off when the film won, proving that musicals could be just as powerful as any drama. Kelly's creativity didn't stop there. His 1949 film On the Town, co-directed with Donen, was one of the first musicals filmed on location instead of studio sets. It followed 3 sailors, played by Kelly, Frank Sinatra, and Jules Munchin, during a 24-hour leave in New York City. The song New York, New York became a classic, and filming in real city streets gave the movie a fresh, energetic feel. In 1954, he starred in Brigadoon, a romantic fantasy about a hidden Scottish village that appears only once every 100 years. Kelly played a lost traveler who stumbles upon it and falls in love. Though it wasn't as big of a hit as his other films, it stood out for its dreamlike setting and emotional depth. By 1955, Kelly was experimenting with new techniques. It's Always Fair Weather, which he co-directed with Donen, used split-screen choreography, something almost unheard of in musicals. The film followed 3 soldiers reuniting years after World War II, realizing they had grown apart. It had a more serious, even cynical tone, making it different from traditional musicals. While it wasn't as commercially successful, it showed Kelly's constant push for innovation. Gene Kelly was a perfectionist. His films were filled with energy and precision, but the process of making them was anything but easy. For the people who worked with him, perfection came at a price. In 1952, Singin' in the Rain became one of the most beloved musicals of all time. But for Debbie Reynolds, it was also the most grueling experience of her career. She was just 19 and had no formal dance training when she was cast as Kathy Selden. Kelly was not impressed. He criticized her constantly and rarely offered encouragement. The Good Morning dance sequence was one of the most difficult scenes to film. Kelly pushed Reynolds through 15 hours of rehearsal. By the end, her feet were bleeding. Exhausted, she collapsed under a piano, crying. Fred Astaire, one of Hollywood's Hollywood's greatest dancers, found her there and offered support. Kelly, however, kept pushing. Despite the endless rehearsals, he chose the very first take for the final cut. The stress took a toll on Reynolds' health. A doctor found that exhaustion had slowed her heart to a dangerous level. MGM suggested methamphetamine injections to keep her going, a method they had used on Judy Garland. Reynolds refused. She continued filming but struggled with Kelly's demanding nature. Their off-screen relationship was no better. During a romantic scene, he kissed her so aggressively that she described it as an assault. She never worked with him again. 4 years earlier, in 1948, Esther Williams starred with Kelly in Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Unlike Reynolds, she was an established MGM star, known for her swimming skills rather than her dancing. From the beginning, Kelly and his collaborator Stanley Donen resented her presence. They believed she was miscast and didn't hide their feelings. Williams later called the experience pure misery. Kelly was especially critical of her height. He also wanted every one of her movements to align with his choreography, even though she had no formal dance training. He and Donen made negative remarks about her throughout production, but Williams refused to be intimidated. She delivered a strong performance, proving she belonged in the film. During production, Kelly was beginning to move into directing. He shared responsibility for the film's musical numbers with Donen, though most of the film was directed by Busby Berkeley. His influence was clear in the vaudeville-style routines he performed with Frank Sinatra. But off-camera, the tension between Kelly and Williams never eased. Sid Charisse had a different experience. She admired Kelly's strength and creativity, but dancing with him was painful. She worked with him on Singin' in the Rain and An American in Paris, and quickly learned how demanding he could be. Her husband could always tell who she had been dancing with. If she came home covered in bruises, it was Kelly. His dance style required power and precision. He insisted that his partners have strong ballet training. He also made adjustments to achieve the visual look he wanted. Charisse, already tall, was forced to wear 4-inch heels in certain routines. It made the choreography even harder, but Kelly wouldn't compromise. Despite the difficulties, Charisse respected him. She believed Fred Astaire was the master of rhythm, but Kelly had unmatched strength and inventiveness. He created dance numbers that challenged his partners, often pushing them to their limit. Gene Kelly's personal life was as complicated as his career. He married Betsy Blair in 1941 when he was 28 and she was just 17. They had met 2 years earlier when Blair, only 15, joined the chorus of Billy Rose's Diamond Horseshoe, a show where Kelly worked as a choreographer. Blair had finished high school early and earned a scholarship to Sarah Lawrence College, but she was considered too young to attend. During that time, she pursued dancing instead, and that was when Kelly entered her life. Despite their age difference, they quickly formed a bond that led to marriage. Their relationship lasted 16 years, and in 1942, they had a daughter, Carrie Kelly Novick. While Kelly's Hollywood career soared, Blair's acting career also took off. She earned an Academy Award nomination for Marty in 1955, but behind the scenes, their marriage was under strain. Blair had strong political views and was investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee due to her Marxist connections. The Hollywood blacklist made it difficult for her to find work, and the pressure took a toll on their marriage. By 1957, they divorced. Blair moved to Europe, where she continued acting and later married director Carol Rice. Kelly rarely spoke about their split, but he acknowledged how difficult it was to balance his career with personal life. His second marriage had its own complications. In 1960, he married Jean Coyne, a dancer who had once been married to Stanley Donen, Kelly's former collaborator and close friend. Donen and Coyne had tied the knot in 1948 after working together on Broadway and in Hollywood. At the time, Coyne had been close to both men, but her bond with Kelly eventually became something more. Donen suspected an affair and felt betrayed when Coyne chose Kelly over him. Their professional partnership never recovered. Donen later admitted he had nothing nice to say about Kelly, while Kelly dismissed Donen as emotionally immature. Despite the scandal, Kelly and Coyne built a life together. They had 2 children, Bridget and Timothy, and their marriage was strong. But in 1973, tragedy struck when Coyne was diagnosed with leukemia. She passed away on May 10th of that year at just 50 years old. Kelly, then 60, was devastated. She had been more than a wife. She was his creative partner and one of the few people he truly relied on. After her death, he stepped away from the spotlight, focusing on raising their children instead of chasing new projects. As Hollywood Hollywood musicals started fading in the late 1950s, Kelly had already begun shifting toward direct. One of his most ambitious projects was Invitation to the Dance in 1956. It was a bold experiment that aimed to merge ballet with film in a new way. Kelly had high hopes for it, but it faced production delays and technical challenges. When it finally hit theaters, it failed to connect with audiences and became a box office disappointment. His next major directing project came in 1969 with Hello, Dolly, starring Barbra Streisand and Walter Matthau. The film had a massive budget of $25 million, making it one of the most expensive productions of its time. While reviews were mixed, it still earned 7 Academy Award nominations and won 3. Interestingly, Kelly had previously turned down The Sound of Music in 1965, believing it wasn't suited to his style. That decision remains one of the more debated moments of his career. By the 1970s, Kelly took on a new role as the face of MGM's golden age of musicals. He became one of the hosts of That's Entertainment. In 1974, a documentary celebrating classic Hollywood musicals. It was a nostalgic look at MGM's history, but also a bittersweet one. By then, the famous backlot where many of those films had been made was falling apart, and much of it was set to be demolished. The film's segments were shot among those crumbling sets, giving it an emotional weight. That's Entertainment was so successful that it led to sequels in 1976 and 1994, as well as That's Dancing in 1985. Kelly used these films to remind audiences of the artistry behind musicals and how dance had transformed storytelling in cinema. In his later years, he stayed mostly out of the public eye. Gene Kelly's later years were defined by an unexpected love story that many found hard to understand. By the time he met Patricia Ward in 1985, he was already a Hollywood legend. His work in musicals had changed the industry forever. Patricia was a 26-year-old writer working on a Smithsonian documentary that Kelly was hosting. She had no idea who he was. It wasn't until they spent a week working together that she realized she was talking to one of the most famous performers in film history. What started as a professional relationship soon became something more. Kelly invited Patricia to California to help him with his memoirs. They spent years working side by side, and by 1990, they were married. Kelly was 78. Patricia was 31. Their 47-year age gap turned heads immediately. The press questioned their relationship, and some critics called it inappropriate. But Patricia always dismissed those concerns. She said she never thought about the age difference until the tabloids made it a story. At one point, she even told reporters she was 36 instead of 31, hoping to quiet the media frenzy. Despite all the outside noise, their bond was real. Patricia later said that Kelly's energy and sharp mind made age irrelevant. They were together until his death in 1996, when he was 83. After he passed, she devoted herself to protecting his legacy. She often spoke out against unauthorized biopics and projects she believed misrepresented his life. In 2022, she strongly opposed a planned film about him, saying that Kelly himself had been against such portrayals. Their relationship may not have made sense to everyone, but it lasted until the end. Even before his marriage to Patricia, Kelly's reputation had sparked debate. For decades, stories circulated about his behavior on set, especially during the filming of Singin' in the Rain in 1952. Some claimed he was harsh toward Debbie Reynolds, who was just 19 at the time. The most extreme version of the story said that Kelly forced her to rehearse until her feet bled, and that doctors had to be called. Patricia Ward Kelly has worked for years to disprove these rumors. She pointed to production notes that documented every detail of filming, saying there was no record of Reynolds needing medical attention. According to Patricia, Kelly was a perfectionist but never cruel. She even credited him with shaping Reynolds into a true Hollywood star. Another rumor claimed Kelly had a tense relationship with Donald O'Connor, his co-star in Singin' in the Rain. Patricia has always denied this, saying Kelly admired O'Connor's talent and felt he never got the recognition he deserved. She even pointed out moments in the film where O'Connor's subtle expressions added humor and depth to their scenes together. But not everyone saw Kelly the same way. Stanley Donen, the co-director of Singin' in the Rain, once described him as difficult to work with. Debbie Reynolds also spoke about an uncomfortable experience during their first on-screen kiss, saying it was more aggressive than she expected. These different perspectives make Kelly's legacy more complicated. Some saw him as a generous mentor, while others remembered moments of tension. What no one can argue is that Kelly changed Hollywood forever. His contributions to dance and film earned him some of the highest honors in the industry. In 1982, he received a Kennedy Center honor for his lifetime contributions to the performing arts. 3 years later, at age 72, he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Film Institute. In 1989, the Screen Actors Guild also recognized his impact on entertainment. Kelly had already received an honorary Academy Award in 1952. The Academy praised him for his versatility as an actor, singer, director, and dancer. At the time, it was rare for a musical performer to receive such recognition. Decades later, in 1994, President Bill Clinton awarded him the National Medal of Arts. By then, Kelly's influence on film and dance was undeniable.